You are going to have people that are going to exit Bitcoin right now. They've already done it. There are people that exited up to 73,000. And I am telling you that from everything that I'm watching, everything that I follow, I am convinced we are not even in the bull cycle yet. What we are going to see next year is going to melt faces. We're going to have come to Jesus moments. And those people that are selling now because of the volatility are, in my mind, making a strategic error.
Today, I'm excited to welcome George Bodine. George is a professional artist, ex-oil field worker, cab driver, miner, ex-cop, Navy fighter pilot, Top Gun grad, Delta pilot, and Bitcoin advocate. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, George.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate your having me here today. I'm looking forward to our talk.
Yes, me too. Before we get to Bitcoin, you've gone through an incredible journey through so many fields. Tell us what unites such a diverse career and how Bitcoin became part of your story.
Well, I do have a very interesting career path. It really isn't a career path as much as I just didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I ended up, I dropped out of high school. Actually, I was expelled from high school for hitting a teacher. And so I'm very fortunate that I didn't just get derailed right there and end up being removed from the home or something like that. And then I went to college eventually. And actually, I got a pilot's license first. I was like 17 years old, and I got my hours by ferrying airplanes around the country for somebody that was basically like a used car dealer. He'd just buy them, and I'd go out there and he'd give me a bus ticket. I'd go out to wherever it was, pick up the plane. And I mentioned this last time I was talking on somebody's podcast. I actually sat in the cockpit reading books, like on how to start the plane, how to get the gas and the going and stuff. And so it was an interesting experience. But then went to college. I dropped out. Just, again, I'm kind of struggling a little bit. Ended up working, like you said, in the oil fields. And I was an ex-cop. I was a police officer for a while. Very rough town that I'd just soon not name. But anyway, I ended up after that underground, working down deep in a mine. And at that point in my life, kind of seemed like I really was going nowhere. And underground is very difficult work. I mean, it's difficult to explain to people what it was like down there. But after about a year of it, I knew that I wasn't going to go anywhere. So I ended up going back to college and then got in the special program to turned me into a normal person, I guess, an officer and a gentleman. And I mentioned this before, but if you've ever seen that movie Full Metal Jacket, that Marine in there, he is the guy that I got to meet when I stepped off that bus that day. And I'll tell you, he straightened my ass out pretty quick. And then I ended up, because of that flying experience, I got to do whatever I wanted. I flew F-18s, Hornets, which was in that movie, the Top Gun movie. Then I got to go through Top Gun, which was great. I even got to become an instructor, what's called an adversary instructor. And boy, that was what an experience. I was up there in Nevada flying these little jets around, trying to attack the fleet guys and just having a blast. And then I ended up in the Delta as an airline captain and retired. And I medically retired. I mentioned this once before. I had a traumatic brain injury, an accident, a motorcycle accident. So I'm very fortunate to be here. I'm really grateful. And it's been quite an experience. The reason I mention all this stuff is because there really is no path here other than the fact that I did in the great financial crisis. I finally understood that there was nobody who cared about my own personal investments, my money, better than I was going to be able to do so. And so I started really following macro and investments. I just was aware of Bitcoin in 2012. And thought it was stupid and Ponzi and every other damn thing. I mean, I was like Michael Saylor in 2013. This is stupid. And, I had a chance. I revisited it in 2017 and I won't say I didn't get it. It just didn't seem like something that I could comfortably get into. And then like in February of 2020, it clicked. Lynn Alden basically wrote an article that worked really well for me, and she explained it. And at the time, I could tell she was investing in it, and I thought, well, this is a moment for me. And today, sitting here now in this studio, if you look at the background and stuff, that's the other thing is I've done art all my life since the accident. I've been working full time, and it's been, really quite an experience for all the Bitcoiners out there who are about to experience a tremendous amount of wealth over the next year. I highly encourage you in your planning to be thinking about how you can do something creative in your life, because it gives you purpose. There are going to be some people over the next year, because we haven't even entered the bull market yet. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we aren't even, this is euphoria, but we're not in the bull market yet. So there are going to be people with a life-changing wealth coming up this year. And I hope people stay focused on what it is they need to do to be a good whole person. Anyway, that's a really long-winded intro. And I promise I'm not going to be boring as we go along with a lot of these long answers. But I just think it's really important to point out some of these things right now.
Well, I don't think that's boring at all. It's fascinating that you have gone through so many different areas. And being a Top Gun grad and a Navy pilot, that takes a lot of discipline. Has that had any effect on your Bitcoin investing?
Well, maybe we should go back to that Marine DI, because he definitely instilled in me what it meant to be disciplined and to stay focused. In fact, I'd have to say one of the biggest parts of that program was to try to keep your head straight on when bad things were happening around you. When they come up and they start screaming at you and throwing stuff around or slapping somebody upside the head, they're basically trying to get you to stay focused, focused on what you have to do. And I'll tell you, the key for me with Bitcoin is this, and this is going to apply. We're going to have a lot of new people getting into this space, and that's great. But in order for you to be successful with Bitcoin, you have to study it. You need to be able to hold it. There's three things you have to do. You've got to get right now as much Bitcoin as you can. You need to stack like some smart psychopath. You need to be stacking every day. You need to be judging what your purposes are in life, what you're doing, how much your fiat you have, whether you're working a shitty job somewhere, but it pays well. Stack now. And when I say smart, what I'm talking about is using tools that are available for you so that you can maximize your Bitcoin stack. We were talking offline just a minute ago. There are only two people that I actually subscribe to any kind of a subscription to. One of them is James Check. You can find him on Twitter at Checkmate or Checkmatey. And the other thing is he actually has a Substack now that you can subscribe to, but you don't have to. You can actually go to this. He maintains charts for free that you can learn, and he has descriptions of them, how they work, and you can teach yourself because, and I believe this is true, James says that if you are intelligent in your investing in these local cycles, the ups and downs, you can maximize your stack. You can get maybe 20% more Bitcoin than somebody who, like Sailor, is just smash buying every opportunity that he gets. And that makes a big difference. And there's another way that you increase Bitcoin, but we'll talk about that maybe later when we touch on our discussion about MicroStrategy and one of the reasons why I use it in my Bitcoin buckets. The other thing is you've got to be able to hold on to the Bitcoin. And, the very first time I ever bought Bitcoin, it was really early. It started going up fast. And volatility is disruptive on the way down, a lot more than on the way up. But you know what? Going up, it's disruptive too. And so I couldn't handle the volatility. It went up a bunch and I just sold it like within a day or two. A couple of days later, I'm sitting around and I was trying to think to myself, why did I do that? And I couldn't come up with an answer. So you are going to have people that are going to exit Bitcoin right now. They've already done it. There are people that exited up to 73,000. And I am telling you that from everything that I'm watching, everything that I follow, I am convinced we are not even in the bull cycle yet. What we are going to see next year is going to melt faces. We're going to have come to Jesus moments. And those people that are selling now because of the volatility are, in my mind, making a strategic error. So let's stop for a minute, though, and acknowledge something. When you look at me right now sitting in the studio, I am an artist. If you look around, I am a master of what I do here. But that background that I was highlighting should show you that I have no idea. I have no degree in finance. My degree is in marketing. None of the things that I'm going to say to you are financial advice. Guess you can call them entertainment or whatever you want to call them, but they're not financial advice. And I've been wrong many a times. I've gotten so many things wrong. I got MicroStrategy wrong in the beginning. I got Bitcoin wrong in the beginning. I have made a lot of strategic errors. But to hold Bitcoin, you need knowledge. Knowledge is what builds conviction, and study every day. Even now, I'm fully, at my age, all my wealth is in Bitcoin or Bitcoin products. I have no exposure to anything else, everything. And that's unusual for someone my age. I talked to a Fidelity rep 2 days ago in reference to financial planning. She advised me, and she handles a lot of clients. She had never met anybody at Fidelity yet in her client list who actually held Bitcoin like this. And I was going to meet with the vice president that day, and basically she said that he would not be able to discuss Bitcoin with me. That tells you how early we are. So in order to hold, you've got to study every day. And like I said, I'm doing that even now. And then the other thing is you can't lose the Bitcoin. You just can't. You cannot lose the Bitcoin. It's too precious right now. Everything you're stacking, you've got to hang on to. There are a lot of ways people lose Bitcoin. This last cycle was brutal. I mean, I saw people out there making lending to FTX, Celsius. I mean, people just trying to pick up nickels in front of a steamroller, and they're getting wrecked. I remember reading about a couple of people. I mean, they lost everything. You just can't do that. If there's one thing we can say right now, and of all the things I'm going to say, this is one of those. This is where the professor on the board, he goes up there and he hits the board, try and wake you up. Bitcoin does not generate yield. It is in its native form. It is a bearer instrument, not generating yield. So that means every time that you get yield on your Bitcoin, you better know where it's coming from. I actually am getting yield on my Bitcoin, but I'm comfortable with it. I know where it's coming from. I know what the risks are with it. If you can't identify those things, then guess what? You are the yield. So remember that. And the other thing is, people are making mistakes just in custody. I know that there are a lot of maxis out there that will say, not your keys, not your coins. Anybody can run a hardware wallet. It's not that hard. I'll tell you another horrible story I read one time was on Reddit. A young man who was heartbroken. He had gotten his father into Bitcoin and taught him, or thought he had him understand how to put his wealth, his retirement on a hardware wallet. And, he ended up, I don't know if he just took a photo of it, or I think he was scammed through a phishing attack, and he lost it all. All of it was gone. So I'm sure that the Thanksgiving dinners after that were kind of difficult for everybody involved. So be careful when you start giving advice to people who may not be able to handle even a hardware wallet. I consider myself a maxi, but I don't give a shit how people custody it as long as they don't lose the Bitcoin. If you've got a 401 and you buy ETFs, I have some, you know what? Good for you. You can explore custody as it's needed. One of the things about custody is that it's not final. People that have ETFs, it's not like you can't move that from an ETF eventually and put it into a wallet. So you just can't lose the Bitcoin.
Just in that case, you would have to sell the ETF, change it to US dollars or whatever your currency is, and then buy Bitcoin and then store it that way.
Exactly right. And in fact, I just did that. I liquidated a position and I had a transfer into my checking account, sizable sum within 3 business days. And then, of course, you're right. I can put it on the rails into an exchange, get it onto exchange, and then get it onto my hardware wallet, which I do have a hardware wallet. But that's the other thing. I don't keep that in the house anymore. Things are changing. This next cycle, we are going to see, put the dial on 11. We are going to see some prices that are going to water eyes. And James, as I mentioned, James Check, he's a great analyst. He used to be the lead analyst with Glassnode. He won't, if you question him, he's probably not going to give you a price quote or a time when he thinks it's going to happen. I will, because one, I'm probably like a village idiot. But the other thing is, you know what? I can honestly say now that if you were to tell me, if Samson Mao, who he and I are friends on Facebook, or Twitter. And if he came to me and he said, George, look, you remember what I said about Bitcoin going to $1 million a coin? I really think it's going to happen next year for sure. I just look at them, I'd say, you know what, that is possible. That could happen. If we really get the SBR, I mean, if that happens, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, if that act, which is already written, I mean, that's going to be on either the president's desk for an executive order, or it's going to be voted on before he even gets there on January 20th. If that thing goes in effect, you could see a seven-figure Bitcoin next year. Anyway, yeah, it's not hard to move things around. It's just you have to be very careful how you do it.
So you bring up James Cook, and I told you that I interviewed him this week, and I did ask him about price. And I think a lot of people are shell shocked from the last cycle. And I understand what you're saying. We have a lot more going for us in this cycle. However, even his price prediction was between 120 and 130. And I said, could it go much higher? And he said, yes. People are being conservative, and I understand that. Besides the strategic reserve, why are you so bullish? And do you have a price prediction?
I was, if you'd asked me 6 weeks ago, I would have said, and I use several models. I have about 3 models that I use that I try to project some idea where, this is going to get overheated. James has got a lot of good points. He'll talk about the fact that John Baptiste Say, 1800s, early 1800s, Say's law says it's supply creates demand, and it's like supply and demand. And for every seller, there is a buyer at a certain price, or for every buyer, there is a seller. That's how markets work. So I'm not saying that there won't be supply that enters the market. Long-term holders sell all the time. This idea that long-term holders like myself, that they don't sell, that's not correct. They do. Now, the thing that's changed is, I'll bet James, if you talk to him about the 4-year cycle, I would imagine he would mirror what I say, which is, I don't know if the 4-year cycle is going to continue going forward. This could be the Omega cycle. It could be something that breaks the 4-year cycles. So what I'm trying to get back to is, you asked me, I was saying, based upon the models, that I thought we'd probably see around 200 to 225,000 of Bitcoin. And I actually intended to liquidate some Bitcoin for the first time, sell some Bitcoin in this cycle. And I usually use several indicators. I like the Pi cycle top. I like the Meyer multiple. I like from Jesse Meyer. I like to use, James has a chart that he put out recently, Euphoria Zone. I just love that chart. I like any chart that's got an oscillator from a mean where I can see that it deviates in standard deviations. Some of those charts, when they get past about 2 to 3 standard deviations, you start paying attention. But the thing is, I don't know if that's going to work anymore. You asked me why. Well, for one thing, the last cycle, I was wrong about that. I thought we were going to see probably a 100,000 Bitcoin last cycle. I was pretty convinced of it. I do think there was things that, that stopped that in its track. For one thing, I think choke point 2.0 was already in effect at that time. And that's, an attempt by the administration without any legal standing to restrict capital access to crypto markets. The other thing is the GBTC premium unwound during that period. It went from a high premium. At one point, they were taking 200,000 Bitcoin off the market daily for a little while. That unwound, went to a discount, and that trade went away. That demand, as again, talking about Say's law, that demand went away. So that was another effect. Obviously, what happened next is the fact that we had all of those collapses, whether it was Luna, whether it was FTX. Actually, FTX was probably the worst. And the reason is because they were selling Bitcoin, other people's Bitcoin. So they were actually creating paper Bitcoin. They were. And all of these things conspired, in my mind, to cut that market rally short. This time, we see that I don't even know where I would start on all the bullish things that are going on right now. In fact, I'm not alone. I think a lot of people are having trouble sleeping right now because there's so much happening, and it's happening so fast. I think one of the biggest things to fall, one of the biggest barriers was this fair value accounting for Bitcoin starting in January. I think that's huge. We've got 1.7 million C Corps in the United States. Those are large corporations. we've got 20 million or something little just single sole proprietorships. I don't know how many millions of corporations that are comparable to C Corps are around the world, but I do know this. They are at some point, most of them going to be looking at Bitcoin. It's happening. Yesterday, there were 7 new public companies that said they were going to put Bitcoin on a balance sheet. That's incredible. I mean, that's just one part of what's happening. FASB accounting rule change, SOB 121 is going to go away. SOB 121, that's a big deal. And that's going to happen this next year. That's another Congress didn't vote on that proposal. That's a rule change from the SEC. And it keeps banks away from Bitcoin. It doesn't prohibit them, but it makes it such toxic to them that they won't hold it on their balance sheets. So banks are coming. There are 4,300 commercial banks in this country right now, FDIC insured, and they're going to want Bitcoin. They're going to want to be able to trade, buy, but more than anything else, they're going to want to custody Bitcoin. And that is going to be huge. The other thing is, we could go on, but I'll just touch on one more thing. I believe that on November 9th, I think our world changed. And I can't tell you who, but I believe on that weekend, starting in Saturday evening, that we had a nation state buying Bitcoin. And the reason I say that is because if you look at sailors' purchases at the market, or if you look at any other organization that's trying to purchase Bitcoin, they're doing everything they can to not move that market. It's called slippage. Nobody wants to, nobody's going to smash buy Bitcoin knowing that they're going to push the price up and then pay a higher price. That doesn't make any sense. But somebody was doing that on that weekend. They were just smash buying. I mean, big numbers like 50, 100 on the market. That's somebody that really doesn't give a damn whether they're moving the market. They just want the Bitcoin. And I believe that eventually we'll find out that it's not just a country, but it's multiple countries that are already buying Bitcoin or mining Bitcoin or holding Bitcoin in a sovereign wealth fund. And I believe that as time goes forward, it's going to be more and more. And if that SBR comes out, if that act passes and we start stacking Bitcoin, do you know how much Bitcoin we're talking? It's not just the number. It's not just 1 million Bitcoin. We're talking every year for 5 years, they're going to be buying more than 500 Bitcoin a day. That is, we're only producing 450 Bitcoin. Where's that going to come from? And that's just them. MicroStrategy in the next 3 years, if they go together with their $42 billion plan, 2121, they are going to be purchasing over 500 Bitcoin a day. There's 19.8 Bitcoin mined right now. There are 4 million probably gone forever, lost. There's about 1 million Bitcoin attributed to Satoshi, and I don't think we're going to see those move. And how much Bitcoin is actually on exchanges that's tradable right now? I think we're over 60% of long-term holders who have not moved their Bitcoin in over a year. And would anybody that's selling their Bitcoin right now, I don't know who that is. I wouldn't let that go for anything right now. I'm convinced that we are going to go a lot higher from where we are now. So anyway, those are the things that I think really through the last market cycle off, I'm very bullish on this cycle. I don't think we've seen some of these effects come into play yet. And I think it's going to be a very bullish next year.
We're going to get into that a little more. But I want to go back to your journey, your Bitcoin journey. What was it that made you start looking into it? Was there something in your life that made you realize that I need Bitcoin, or what did you see?
We've got some people in this space that are really sharp people that have been maybe even ex-gold bugs. A lot of Bitcoiners don't like gold bugs, and that's stupid. Gold bugs are just Bitcoiners. I mean, gold bugs are Bitcoiners that don't even know they're Bitcoiners yet. People like Larry Lepard, he and I are friends, and you know what? He gets it. That guy is so sharp. And, I agree with his thoughts about both Bitcoin and gold, but I don't have that background. The only thing I'll say is I don't like authority very much, and I have libertarian streaks in me. And perhaps, the idea of seeing Bitcoin as a powerful instrument that allows you to move away from the system really appealed to me. I'll tell you one thing. Alan Farrington, who wrote Bitcoin is Venice, commissioned me to do the book cover on that. And that's my painting on there. And it's similar to a painting that's in the background behind me right now. But that one's in color, and I did his in a very special type of a pigment from Italy. Anyway, he also wanted a painting, and it had something else to do with in his life. But he sent me a payment. I didn't even have a wallet. He's the one who encouraged me to get a wallet and walked me through sending it to me. Well, the first time it happened and I got that Bitcoin in that wallet, I couldn't believe it. I was just sitting there going, how is this possible? And I looked at it, and it had a dollar amount on it. It was like on some, some software program. It might have been Ledger, which I do not recommend, but it might have been a Ledger then before I knew better. And so, he showed me that power. And once you see that, I mean, that's a powerful thing. It's hard to unsee that. And so I think that all these things kind of contributed, plus reading, studying.
Well, you've come a long way since then, I could tell, receiving Bitcoin to your knowledge today. You mentioned that we are not even in the bull cycle. Well, we could argue that since the very beginning of the bear, the start of the bull is at the very bottom. But what you're saying is we just hit 98,000 today, which is amazing. You think that the train is just leaving the station?
Yeah, I do. And that's good and bad. I just read a great article by Shinobi in Bitcoin Magazine 3 days ago. And, it's kind of sad because we're going to leave a lot of people behind. I really do think that the Bitcoin train is right there at the station now. And, the engineers up there, and they're shoveling coal into this boiler, and they're building up steam. People are still saying, well, is this a good time to buy? And you and I mean, we've got our Bitcoin. I got a ticket. I'm just sitting there. I'm on the train now. I walked on board. I had a ticket. I'm sitting down next to you and all of our friends and people that are in this space that are together with us. We're all sitting there on the train. We're ready to go. But there's a whole world out there on that platform that's standing there watching us, and they're not getting on board. And we're going to end up leaving them behind. And there'll be people that are calling out to the kids that they love, or a brother, and they're not going to get it. And they're going to be saying, no, come on board. But once the train pulls out, they're going to run along the side of it. They're going to look at it. It's going to go away. They'll see the back of that train disappear, and it's too late for them. It's gone. I won't say it's too late. Let's put it this way. If you know what you're doing in this space right now, you need to be building generational wealth for the people that you love that don't get it. At Thanksgiving, you don't need to be crowing about your Bitcoin. What you need to do is just quietly stack and start building generational wealth, so that someday, like me, you can look at me, you see how old I am. I'm going to die at some point. I'm on the back side here. I can see the end up in front. And, when I'm gone, those kids, they're going to go to the reading of the will, and they're going to sit there, and my grandkids, and you know what? They're going to have a ticket. It's going to magically appear in their hands. They're going to get on the Bitcoin train on the platform that just magically appeared, and they're going to go down and start their journey. So, this is an important asset. This is an asset that you build for a lifetime of wealth, generational wealth.
So part of your motivation is building generational wealth. And you did mention that you'll take some lifestyle chips. Do you have anything that you would like to enjoy with that?
Well, I'd like to get a really fast jet. I'd like to go really fast again. I love going fast. I tell you, when you were flying in the Hornet and you shove those throttles up in there into the burner, I mean, you can feel yourself. You get pushed back in the seat, and then it's easy. You slip right in, you go right past the sound barrier, and it's like you don't even feel it, but it just moves across the plane. It's quiet. Boom, you're right through it like that. Next thing you know, you're on your way. So I'd like to go really fast again. But, there are a few things I want to do right now. And you have to remember, again, where I'm at in my life, it's different. I have all the Bitcoin I need. I don't need any more Bitcoin. And that's not usual for people to say. And, at some point, you do kind of need to think to yourself, what is enough? I mentioned this story once before, and I don't know if you know who Joseph Heller is. He wrote Catch-22. Brilliant author. And, that book is an amazing book. back in my day, we had to read it. We were required in high school. They forced you to. And there were no clip notes. I mean, you had to read the damn book. But it was a great story. But he was at a party once, Shelter Island in New York, and he was at a very wealthy hedge fund manager's home, and he was throwing a party. And, a lot of wealthy people there, and this author. And there was another author, a friend of his, and he asked him, he said, does it bother you, pointing over to the hedge fund manager, that this man has so much more wealth? He's probably earned more in one day than you ever received from the royalties on that wonderful book you wrote. And Heller looked at him, he said, no. He said, because I have something that he will never have. I have enough. And, you kind of need to think to yourself, I don't want to scoop up any more Bitcoin. What I really want is I want everybody else to start getting some Bitcoin. I want everybody else to start, that's one of the reasons I'm doing these podcasts. I mean, I don't normally do podcasts, but people need to get on board. This is your moment. And, soon, as I mentioned, I really think the prices are going to start accelerating. In that last cycle, I bought all the way down to 17,000. So imagine, for $1,700. Now, that's not out of the reach of a lot of people. I got 1/10 of a Bitcoin. Well, if Samson Mao's right and it goes up to $1 million next year, you know what? You're going to need $100,000, not $1,700, $100,000 to get that Bitcoin. It makes a big difference.
Yes, it does. You mentioned in your pinned tweet that life is as good as you let it be. And when you're sharing about what you're saying, I have enough. And I also spoke to Jeff Booth, who is also a little bit of that mindset, saying it's not all about getting more and more, but about living the life you want to live and enjoying what you want to do. Is that what you mean by that quote?
Well, it may be a little deeper than that. Time is a precious commodity. In fact, it's more like I'll tell you how to illustrate this. If you go up to a person and you ask them, what does it mean to be free? Many times the common response, the thread that you get is, I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, and with whom I want. Well, when you say those things, you also are saying some other things that you might not be aware of. For instance, when you say, I want to do what I want, that also means that you need to be physically able to do so. And I strongly encourage people as they get older, and for me, it's like past the age of 40 to 50, I think that you should work out every day. I lift weights daily. I think you should do cardio. I think you should eat well. I think you should take care of yourself so that you can do just what you said. You can go climb a mountain. I go out there, I go elk hunting. I take a bow with me, a tent. I go back by myself, usually into the woods several miles. I'm out there hunting alone, climbing mountains. I can still haul an elk out if I get one, which is pretty hard to do. But anyway, what I'm saying, and then the other thing is, it's when I want. Well, guess what that means? You better understand the meaning of time, because time is precious. It is the one thing, it's like Bitcoin. It's finite. It's precious. And then with whom you want means that you also need to, as you go on this journey, when I say be magnanimous and not, go through life joyfully, it means that, for one thing, you should be cultivating the friends and family that you have, so at the end of your journey, you're not alone. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love that. So let's go back to MicroStrategy. You mentioned that you invest in MicroStrategy, and you've talked about accretive dilution. Tell us a little bit about what that means and why you choose to invest in MicroStrategy as well as Bitcoin.
This will be a great topic. I'll try not to talk too long. I'll take a break as we go through this, because this is the topic that people are discussing right now. There will be Bitcoiners who will call me a shitcoiner because of the fact that I hold MicroStrategy. I've even heard people on the X discuss the fact that MicroStrategy doesn't have Bitcoin, just as they say ETFs don't have Bitcoin. First off, I again, pull your head out of your ass, start doing some reading, and understand what you're saying, because those two statements are not correct. Now, if you want to say that I have a proxy for Bitcoin, that's fine. I understand. And I'm not trying to downplay some of the legitimate concerns around like the ETFs. And I think there are some really severe ones, or even MicroStrategy. There are some arguments regarding MicroStrategy that are worth listening to. MicroStrategy is one of the most difficult things for people to get their heads around right now. And I think that it's the emotion behind some of the trading that's going on. The very first time I had MicroStrategy, just like we talked about volatility, it's a very volatile stock. And in the last cycle, I got it at a very cheap price and it shot up like a rocket. Guess what I did? Again, I sold it just like I did my Bitcoin because I didn't understand what I held. And a same exact thing, like 2 days later, I'm just sitting there and I'm staring at a screen or something. I think it was still going up. And I was thinking, why did I sell that? I couldn't answer the question. So over time, by just studying, like we talked about, by just reading, just studying, I finally began to understand it. And one of the things that people cannot get is this idea of yield. MicroStrategy released something in the last earnings call, not the last one, but the one in June, that kind of blew people away. If you were paying attention, they released something called a KPI, key performance indicator, which is that's not abnormal, but they called it a Bitcoin yield KPI. That got people's attention. And when I say I'm getting a yield, what I'm talking about is this. From the very first part of the year, and we should acknowledge the fact that, again, this is not financial advice, and I actually have a very large position in MicroStrategy. And from that period, from the start of the year to today, like you said, today's the 21st of November, I have received 42% more Bitcoin today than if I had just bought Bitcoin on January 1st. Now, you might say that's not yield. You might say it's not interest. You know what? Let me tell you this. What do you want more than Bitcoin? I want more Bitcoin. So I'm doing everything I can to get more Bitcoin. Now, earlier I said I had enough. Well, I'm not going out on the spot market and trying to deprive people of their buying power, but I am smart enough to know that this company is leveraging themselves to get more Bitcoin. Their MNAV, the to net asset value right now is about 3. So right now, MicroStrategy has got about $30 billion worth of Bitcoin. They've got $6 billion worth of debt. They maintain, through something they call intelligent leverage, less than 25% debt to equity. And they're doing that. Right now, they're at 21%. So they've got a little runway here to keep going. And that runway is going to get a lot bigger soon. So they're going to continue doing this. Their market cap is $100 billion right now. That's part of the problem. What I just said, their market cap is $100 trillion. $100 billion. They've got 30 billion of Bitcoin. That NAV, that ratio is above 3, and people don't understand it. And here's why. If anybody's listening right now and you're struggling with MicroStrategy, what I'm about to say is probably the most important thing that you can understand about that stock. MicroStrategy is a growth company utilizing their treasury to securitize Bitcoin. That's what they are. That's it. But that's a powerful thing, because what have they done? They've picked the greatest, the most pristine capital that you could ever have on this planet. And that's their treasury. They're 100% in on it. They are completely transparent. They tell you how many shares are outstanding. Every time they float debt, they include those shares to make sure that everybody understands exactly how many shares are outstanding. Then they are transparent about what their goals are. Now, they might activate those goals a little early, but they're telling you what they're going to do. If you have not listened to the latest earnings call by Michael Saylor, I suggest strongly that you go do so. It is probably one of the greatest earning calls. I've never listened to anything like it before. And he, again, is very honest. And he tells you as a stockholder are with me on this journey. We are in this together. So let's get back to what I said. If you understand what I just said about what it is, what kind of company is this, then you should understand this. If you look at some of the best performing stocks right now, if you look at Microsoft or you look at Apple, what is the multiple of their market cap to their underlying assets? It's huge. It's probably It's probably 50 for Microsoft. So when I wrote the other day, I think I put out a tweet on X that what Michael Saylor had just done in the last 24 hours was he created a $1.5 trillion company. Seems to understand that yet, but that's where this is going. Because his multiple is going to be in that same ballpark. There's nothing different from what he's doing. You know, their team of, I guess you'd call it a financial planning team, how they're working these instruments, they're very smart. I think that from what I've been told, there's less than like 10 people working there doing this. But they are laddering these debt instruments out there between like 27 to 32 right now. And they've got 5 outstanding. He just floated one, the senior notes yesterday for 2.6 billion with 0 interest. The 5 that are outstanding, the blended interest rate is 50 bips, half of 1%. Now, you know from being in your industry, that's hard to imagine. You can't do that. I can't do that. I don't know of any other company that isn't doing what they're doing as a growth company, Bitcoin treasury, securitizing Bitcoin that can do that. It's them. They're going to have their debt's going to be totally unencumbered. Those outstanding debt instruments, except for one of them, I think are going to convert early. They're going to be able to do the latter again. He just released, and this ties back to why I am in MicroStrategy, very open, transparent. They said we are going to buy $42 billion worth of Bitcoin over the next 3 years, 21. It's the largest ATM at the market offering in the history of the markets. And listen to this, Paul. Listen to this. They were going to do this next year, starting January 1st, 10 billion, then 14 billion, then 18 billion in the third year. Well, today is the first, and they have already spent over 65% of their allocated funds for next year now. It's not even the first of the year. Do you see where this is going? So those are some of my thoughts on MicroStrategy. And again, not financial advice. You know, timing is everything as far as understanding where it sits. There are risks associated with MicroStrategy. I will tell you another thing that most people don't know is that the interest that he's paying on those 5 instruments right now is $34 million a year. They actually make from their core business, the underlying business, they make 70 million probably easily in revenue. So he can cover these small interest payments just from the income from the company, the core. And the other thing is these are going to be unencumbered. He's not going to get margin called on these. That's not happening. They're in the money. There's no risk on these assets. Now, I can't say going forward that there won't be. I don't know how they're going to structure things, but you know what? A 0 interest rate loan of $2.6 billion, and it's 55, the premium's 55 on it. Now, I don't know if you know what that means, but they probably negotiated that. For instance, maybe Saylor or probably his financial team, they said, you know what, we want 0 interest rate. So how do we get it? Well, we're going to have to go to the hedge funds. We're going to have to market this. You know, we're going to go out there and put it out there, and we're going to see what kind of interest there is. And then we're going to come up with the right premium. That means they'll buy this. But 55 is pretty damn good. That means that I'm getting a lot more Bitcoin. Again, every time he does this, every time there's a premium, I'm getting more Bitcoin every time.
It's quite an amazing business model.
It is.
You know, you mentioned one of the people that you subscribe to, James Check, and then James Lavish wrote a wonderful piece on this MicroStrategy in his newsletter, also saying exactly what you're saying in a very clear, easy to understand way. So there are some incredible people out there who are helping us understand these things. I just want to mention that investing in MicroStrategy, it's a leverage call, a leverage trade on Bitcoin. I understand that. You don't have the Bitcoin in your self-custody, but you're going to benefit by the price increase. So I just wanted to ask, Jeff Booth always says, when we invest, even in the regular fiat world, it's still making that world stronger. Whereas when we're in Bitcoin, we are making the Bitcoin world stronger. Do you see the two worlds coexisting?
Well, that's a tough one because it touches on a subject that's going to be difficult for a lot of people to understand or maybe accept, or it could even be depressing a little bit for some people. But I think we should discuss something, which is that, a lot of the things that I have been holding out for that is all related to the adoption of Bitcoin. And we have got some major issues going forward with that adoption. If you get back to the just basic first principles here, and you look at a blockchain, and you're going to build a blockchain, you're going to have 3 buckets, and you're only going to get 2 of them. You're going to have to choose. You've got decentralization, security, and scalability or speed. And you get to only have 2 of them. Can't have the 3rd bucket. So Satoshi wisely, forego scalability or speed. And we all know that you're only going to do about 7 transactions a second on the base layer. But what most people don't know is that the blocks themselves are very restricted. And I'm not talking about, I don't even need to discuss the block size war because you're not going to be able to fix that by increasing block size. Right now, we're going to mine 55,000 blocks this year, a little bit more, at an average of about 949, 955, somewhere in there. Each one of those blocks over the last year, they had 4,094 transactions on average in them. But those are not 4,094 individual people. Those are transactions. If you look at how many people we could have transact on the base layer, it'd probably be 150 million people, maybe 200 million. Well, how in the hell are we going to scale up Bitcoin? We all know that you can't scale on the base layer, and Satoshi knew that too. I mean, I figured this out. If you took 4 out of the 8 billion people and tried to do that with 2 transactions, in and out, I mean, it'd take 25 years to get them onto Bitcoin. So a lot of people say, well, Lightning's the answer. Well, guess what? Lightning has to touch the base layer to open or close channels. And it's the same thing. You've got a 2 multi-sig, and that a multi-sig takes up more data in a transaction. It makes it more clogged. That's not going to work either. Now, I love Lightning. I use it. I use the crap out of it. I use it down in El Salvador. It was a blast, and I still have it. And I still like zapping people. And one of the things that's great about Lightning is, guess what? The cost is so cheap, you can do that. It's wonderful. And then, I've been looking at Fedimint. Fedimint's quite an interesting idea, or liquid Bitcoin, where you're pegged sidechain going in and out of the sidechain. That could allow us to do some massive scaling. And, I mentioned earlier about Bitcoiners maybe being a path to great wealth. Well, guess what? You could do that. If you were a trusted third party, if you went to some community down in South America and you were trusted within that community and maybe 3 or 4 different elders or people that were trusted, you could start your own bank down there and help a lot of people. But the problem is that, and the institutions are here. I thought they were going to be here in 21. And that's another thing I got wrong. Again, they weren't here. FASB, they couldn't get here with FASB. And the other thing is Bitcoin's too small then. It didn't have enough liquidity. There's not enough market. People are pissy about these options trading, and they're not thinking this through. You can't if you want Bitcoin to scale to 100 trillion, if you want it to be really a scalable network, you're going to have liquidity, and you can't have it without options. Nobody's going to come in. No major institution will come in and put a $30 million position in Bitcoin without being able to hedge that. It's not possible. It'd be irresponsible. You got to have these options there. And not only that, here's another thing. These ETFs and options, tell me how you would prevent that. I can't think of a way. It's inevitable. And I knew they were coming, and they're here. And I've known options are coming. They're here. And I've thought institutions were here, but guess what? The tripwires have been set. They're triggered. The flares are in the air. They're inside our perimeter, and they're with us now. Sitting on that train is BlackRock, and he takes up 8 zillion seats. He crowds you out of the car, but he's here, and they have power. You look at Saab 121. Larry Fink, he wants to have a banker. He calls on the weekend. The next thing you know, Bank of New York is his banker now. So they got an exception for them. They're here, and they are going to change our landscape significantly. And when you start talking about block space, a good person to talk to would be Bob Burnett. He started me down this rabbit hole. He's the CEO Barefoot Mining. And the more and more I study this issue, the more and more I see he's right. We are going to have some big things coming up. We've only got 6 or 7 mining pools right now that are basically controlling 85% of all the transactions in the mempool. I mean, they're building the mempool templates. They're the ones that have power there. People are just blindly sending in their successful blocks to these mining pools who already have a pre-built template. Ocean, that's another thing that Bob is behind, and I strongly support that pool. I think that Ocean might be a way to get some of our power back in the coming years. But I don't want to just be totally dark. If you zoom out, once again, tell me one way that we could have kept these institutions from coming into our space. I can't think of a way. So they're here, and we're going to have to deal with it. And as this gets bigger and bigger, it's going to change some of the things that we thought we were going to be able to do.
Yeah, I think you made some really great points there. And I do hear hope. And what gives me most hope in the Bitcoin space is how many smart people are here working on it. And I think they're going to find a way to scale on the number 2 and 3 layers. So we'll leave it to them. And in the meantime, keep stacking and do what we need to do, keep learning, as you keep mentioning. That's so important. So we're almost up an hour, and I wanted to ask you, how has Bitcoin changed you?
Well, I will say that it's given me hope. I have more hope than I would have in previous times. Before I discovered Bitcoin, I mean, if we were sitting here right now, one of the things that Bitcoin, once you start down the rabbit hole, it changes everything about you. You start to read more about history of money, how central banks are formed. Unfortunately, when you start getting a lot of that knowledge, it's kind of depressing, because you realize that we're in a very rigged system that is privileged for a very small elite, and that we have in the past not had much power in that system. So Bitcoin, it's kind of that asymmetric power. It's like a superpower, that a hero would have. And when you understand that and you start to think about it that way, it gives you a lot of hope. I do believe that going forward, a lot of the traditional financial platforms, the asset allocators, the central banks, their power is going to decrease over us. I don't think that the dollar itself, I mean, a lot of people think the dollar is going to go away. I don't think that is the case. I think it's going to be a long time before we see that. But the good news is that there are a lot of smart people, like you said. I mean, I'm just an artist right now. There are a lot of smart people that have these things on their mind too. And I think we'll see a lot of really interesting solutions going forward. And, if we are successful with this SBR, that is going to also change the landscape. We will be in a global arms race then for stacking sats. And that's another thing. Imagine you're in that train car and the United States comes through the door walking on board that platform. They're going to take up some room in that car. And we're going to have to, I guess really what I'm saying is, my plea is to the people who are a lot smarter than me. I hope that we can come up with some ideas so that we can get the other people out there on that platform with us on our journey.
And I was going to say that's a great place to end, but I just want to mention, I don't quite understand when they say that nations are going to print money to buy Bitcoin. And that is probably going to happen. I saw Pomp suggest it. And what that means is we're increasing the money supply to buy Bitcoin, which, yes, will increase the value of Bitcoin, but it will mean that everything gets more expensive. And that, yes, Bitcoin will increase, but long term it's going to buy less because we're over increasing the money supply.
Well, that's going to be a very painful period for people that are in those types of economies. You remember, there's really there are very few countries that have their own currency and their own printing press. And we, as de Gaulle's finance minister said, we, the United States, we have an exorbitant privilege in printing the world's reserve currency. So, and it's going to give us a privilege in this race also. And for countries that are dollarized, it's going to be a struggle. And for those countries that have currencies that are weak, it's going to be a struggle too for them to get that Bitcoin. I do think that those countries that are foreshadowing where this is going, like Bhutan or El Salvador, I think that they're going to have a real leg up on a lot of other nations. So probably we're going to see a changing in the world order as nation states either get on board this train or get left behind. And, what I hope is that people that are in these positions, in these countries, what I hope is that they'll understand and try somehow to get that Bitcoin exposure, even if it is through Lightning on a wallet, or if it's through, and again, I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but even if it's USDT, even if they're on Liquid on the Peg sidechain and they're just getting some Bitcoin exposure, just get the exposure as a way to try and prevent being bled out in your own currency. And we see that all over the world. I hope that people get more educated about this, either through podcasts like this, through other influencers or people that can reach out to them, because again, we have a narrow window and we need to get as many people on board as we can.
Well, I love that. So I hope some people get on board watching this. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome, Paula, and have a great day.